the civilization of the Celestial Empire is at least 5,000 years old. The various sources from the chronicles discovered on the territory of the PRC is confirmed by archaeological finds as well as historical and linguistic analysis of the Chinese language, in which the concepts and symbols which stand for emperor are among the most ancient. And although the cultures of western part of Asia and the Indus are about 1,000 years older, the celestial tradition follows them and is the originator of the basic high customs of later eras. Among them are such as a court ceremony, or a way of pleasing a man who, by his strength and wisdom, led to the prosperity of several inland dependencies at once. And over time, the mundane memo of the imperial entertainment began to contain hundreds of various elements. So it's time to introduce to you the topic of this episode, Great Celestial Empire and its dynasties. You're watching Now Flip Side of History, and we continue. Stay with us. The Ming Dynasty was the first to compile all previous experience into one strict codex. Harem entertainment for the master of the Celestial Empire, apparently who personally received permission from all the deified natural elements in the Taoism widespread here, was awarded precise rules during the period of this glorious dynasty of Chinese rulers. The beginning of this family law dates back to the 14th century. By this time, the Han Chinese, indigenous people of China from the north, had joined the barbarians. The wall didn't help much. Well, of course, the rules of royal entertainment must include the ancient customs of the unified group, which later became the Tungusic Manchu, Mongolian and Turkish groups, and probably Korean as well. The north of the Celestial Empire, due to constant invasions, was subjected to endless influx of various ethnicities and, consequently, assimilation. There was their own interpretation of customs. Who exactly was assigned to the rulers as a women's collective? As a result of these standards, it was much easier for wives and concubines than for their counterparts in the Muslim East. But in certain ways it is much more complicated. The harem of the state was specific and had restrictions. On every occasion, everything, whether in the tea ceremony, in dances or in bid, was based on the reverence for natural forces and geographical directions. For one instance, the spouse had to have only 4 cardinal directions, which namely are south, north, west and east. The owner of such a unified system himself was the fifth element, the unifier of the elements. Such symbolism was present in everything related to the activities of the celestial sovereign. As for the number of concubines, they took as many as could be fed. And dancers and singers, among whom there were also a lot of nannies, still had to receive money. In fact, these women were hired workers. Although maids were, as a common rule, slaves, taken during raids, taken for debts brought as gifts, however, in the years of the highest prosperity of the empire, the salary was given to all the inhabitants of the harem. But this is not something which was particularly Chinese either. Islam also allowed only 4 wives and so on. The celestial nuances were vastly different nonetheless. In addition to geographical directions, wives also symbolized the human senses, more precisely the image of the entire multinational state. Each human organ of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and the, let's say, shameful apparatus was of equal importance, although in real life it was an ordinary thing to live without the latter for certain men. On the basis of their equal value, each spouse received an equal number of maids, roughly 12. We do not know what this number means in Chinese numerology, but we are free to think it's all about astrology. Read more carefully. Concubines of the highest and middle categories could have only 8 maids, and the younger, newest ones had just 6. But again, many other concubines around the globe at the time would be jealous of such privilege. In this regard, Chinese wives and concubines had priority over members of the Islamic states. Emperors also treated women with much more praise than, again, in Muslim palaces. But it's not so one-sided. And what is the result? In general, some preserved Chinese documents indicate that in the Ming Dynasty, the harem of some emperor, when there were wives, their daughters, concubines with daughters, as well as maids and hired artists at the same time, numbered 40,000 ladies. Could it be an open bragging? Concealed duties performed by spouses and concubines. Alright, let's start by noting that we will put aside the little girls, the hired workers, and the hired maids. They had certain activities that had nothing to do with the most ordinary topics of the review: playing, singing, dancing, reciting poems, performing magic tricks, or doing domestic work. We are interested in the wives and concubines who were closer to the emperor's body, in every sense of the word, even, yes, in the most intimate sense. How did they satisfy the Lord of the Four Elements in order to metaphorically demonstrate the obedience of all four main elements to him? It turns out that despite the seemingly more relaxed position of the main women of the Chinese imperial town, compared to the rest of Asia, they had much more responsibilities. Let's begin with the fact that the most beloved half was visited by the Son of Heaven only once a month. He had to accumulate energy for 30 days for the next, you know what kind of activity. Her natural feminine energy was the most important. The whole empire was looking at her, so to speak, because the next Son of Heaven was to emerge from her treasured hands. It must be filled to the brim with power and joy. With the wives of the secondary sort, it was possible to do these sort of things more often. But in the selection of concubines, there was a strict selection from the very beginning. In some incomprehensive way, specially trained people tested the level, direction, and quality of their feminine energy. So apparently beauty is not the pivotal thing. The possessors of secondary energies, new courtesans, were not to give their voices without the permission of experienced concubines and at a higher level of their wives. As among the flora-fauna, the harem lived according to the laws of an unvarying hierarchy, feminine power being at its center. So how did the overlord absorb all these various energies and determine the main and secondary ones? Well, that's how. There were a whole bunch of treatises with watercolor pictures. The process, as well as the famous tea ceremony, was so rigidly regulated thanks to Taoism mixed with forms of bureaucratic shamanism from the northern mixed population, that the explanations of bad practice resembled a real technical manual. For violation, they were expelled from the Forbidden City, despite the reality that the innocent lived here until their death. A eunuch visited the woman all prepared. The preparation, judging by the boredom, was the whole tea ceremony, and signaled that the ruler liked her today. In the back room in front of his bedroom, he walked around naked. It was clear that this man, with all his power, was not a daredevil with bad intentions. Surely the eunuch has checked all the natural cavities of the person who went on the mission, and he can do it if he's a eunuch. What are one's future plans? The mission itself. In spite of that, even then, the person who chose to change women's power cannot enter alone. He was wrapped in a parchment of herons down, and only in this form was he sent to the chamber of the Guardian of Universal Order. Aware of the importance of their mission, the two eunuchs on their shoulders were placed on the battery of the large bed. In the Ming Dynasty, the eunuch indeed went out, but the woman entered. She was obligated to perform the function of a third half. Well, you got the idea, the perversions without limits on the level of the highest ruler. After this dynasty, the practice of using a senior lady-in-waiting ceased. What's the cause? Optimization to reduce staff and thus to pay less? Reduction of jobs in the harem? Simple shyness? No one today will answer for sure. But a ritual that existed before the Ming presents a very different, more awkward rather than perverted, procedure. It turns out that earlier, instead of a lady-in-waiting, the act was observed by the important triple, consisting of the emperor's mother, the most experienced wife out of all, as well as a eunuch scribe, who kept a record of everything that happened during the pleasures of the bed. Although in our modern understanding, it's difficult to call it a real pleasure, although they thought differently. So, long story short, you get the whole concept. One gave advice in case of a possible difficulty in the process of the universal procedure, the other wrote everything down, and the Great Mother apparently controlled everyone in the bedroom and thus controlled the compliance with duties. And it seems that it was this broader view that was the note that was added to the customs of the Han Chinese by the Northerners, who had previously lived as a large patriarchal family in yurts, chums, teepees, in which there were no separate rooms. What was exactly going on if everything was so serious that the Chamber of Major Affairs was born? It turned out that this secret or public aspect of their lives would be more accurate and detailed than the Kama Sutra itself. Just do not violate it and you will be on the payroll of the Forbidden City for the rest of your days. But it's not just about the instructions, most of which took shape already in the 10th century, but also about the emperor's personal opinion about the skill of a woman. If he came out with a happy face saying, "She can stay," then next to the name of the lady there was a scribe about the mercy of the emperor. Since there were too many hunters for favors, the young ladies had to clench in the imperial bid by all means. And to preserve longevity, only virgin girls were prescribed as a great medicine. After the Ming, the new invaders from the north also introduced new approaches to this question. In conclusion, there is something to be said. The practice of a certain secret Chinese Kama Sutra, acquired in the conditions of centuries-old court perfectionism and fierce competition, got into inns and brothels with the departure of concubines into the common world. That is why red light districts in Chinese cities are the most yearned for places for many men. Thank you for watching. Our episode has come to an end. But you can check out our other episodes on the channel. Leave a like as well as subscribe to the channel. And for now, see you later on Flip Side of History.